Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lynn Berger, host of Lynn Berger Interviews Remarkable People. And today I have the privilege of speaking with Danielle Mailer, public artist, and teacher, among many other things. I'm thrilled to have Danielle on the show today. Danielle, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lynn, for bringing me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Thanks.
So take me back to your earlier years. Did you know what you wanted to do?
So in my family, there are 9 children. And out of those 9, 8 of them are artists. Not just painters, screenwriters, novelists. My father emphasized from almost in utero, my children will be artists. And so my earliest memories are of making art. And I also had what I consider to be good luck and bad luck. I was very dyslexic, and at that time, that we're talking many, many years ago, there wasn't really a name for someone that couldn't learn to read. But because of this sort of deficit, I turned to art as sort of for my self-esteem and my identity. And I think my father, who, I was his second daughter, he was, very concerned about his 2 daughters and how they would evolve into the world. And so he recognized that I couldn't learn to read, but I was kind of gifted in the arts. And so as early as 5, he decided, I'm going to really cultivate this. So he would take my sister and I every Sunday to the Museum of Modern Art. So I was maybe 7 at that point, my sister was 5. We would go, we had our little clipboards, we'd look at Cezanne, we'd go through MoMA and we'd look at the Matisses, and he would talk about how Cezanne could make drapery look like clouds. And we sort of took this all in, and then we'd go to Rizzoli's across the street and buy art books. So at age 7, I was holding a Hieronymus Bosch book that was larger than myself. I yearned for F.A.O. Schwartz, but that wasn't going to happen. So he planted the seeds, and he really cultivated that and really supported it. And so from my earliest memories, I was sort of earmarked to be an artist.
That's so inspiring, and it's interesting, but it was your talent at first and your interest.
Yeah, that really stuck out. I mean, I had an easel in my room. My mother got me a set of acrylic paints when I was 9. She was also an artist, so there was that sense of like household. My sister was writing at the time, and so we were sort of percolating along, doing our thing, and it felt very right. I felt very validated. It was just a very special upbringing in that regard.
For people that don't know, who was your father?
So my father's Norman Mailer, and the late Norman Mailer, and he was many things to me. He was a role model. He was a source of ennui at times. It was a very chaotic, hectic, sometimes traumatic childhood. But we were a very close-knit family, and one of the things that people don't know about my father, which I always love telling them, is that he was a family man, and he loved having his 9 children seated around a table. That was he was never happier than when he had his kids with him. And he used to say things to me like, at 18, I wanted to go get a job. He's like, don't get a job, I'll support you, do your art. So that was lovely, but the downside is that no one really learned how to make a living in my family. I am the only one that has a day job, so I became a teacher, because I realized I couldn't make a living with just painting. And that was a nice balance between the two. But that wasn't the life lesson he gave me. The life lesson he gave me was discipline. He used to say, if you have the urge to paint, to make art, and you thwart it, you're cheating the cosmos. And I always remember that in the back of my mind. And the other thing I have on my computer is a wonderful phrase which is on his gravestone, which says, there is that law of life so true and so just, that one must grow or pay more for remaining the same. So that's a quote that has both enlivened me, haunted me, inspired me, because there have been things that have come into my life that were scary and challenging. And that quote, which is attached to my laptop, reminds me, no, you have to say yes to things, even if it's out of your comfort zone. You have to grow. So.
Well, you're a true example, because we're going to get into all these things you've done over the years. So tell us a little bit about your education. You were dyslexic.
Yes, dyslexic. I went to a little tiny school in Greenwich Village where everyone was divorced and alcoholic, and we all sort of muddled through. There was very little parenting, I should say that. When I look back, I can marvel how I am as a mother. I'm a total helicopter parent, but growing up, there was so much autonomy and so much sense that we'd all be fine. I wanted to provide something for my daughter that I did not get myself. Although my mother, for all of her, she had a hard life. She was an alcoholic. She struggled with a lot of self-esteem issues, but she was actually a very solid parent in the sense of 3 meals a day and a stickler for bedtime, and she was not bohemian. She was very bohemian, but when it came to her children, her 2 daughters, she was kind of like a very fiercely committed mother. But within that, there was a lot of sort of loosey-goosey, freedom within that.
Okay.
So for me, with my I have a daughter and 2 stepkids, but they feel like my own. I really, I've been more involved. Like when I call up my daughter, I never bring up my own. I never blab on about myself.
So now let's get to your art.
Okay.
As an extremely talented artist.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to prepare for this interview because I got to really see what you've done over the years. And what struck me was the color, the energy, and I love color.
Well, for me, okay, so it started with my mother. I have to give her credit where credit's due. So we had these wonderful, sprawling Upper West Side, first Greenwich Village apartments and Upper West Side apartments. She always picked the room with the best light to have her studio. So we had palettes all over the living room. We had many cats and dogs. She always would bring in strays, 3-legged cats or dogs that couldn't be housebroken or poodles with leukemia. But there's a whole array throughout, sometimes as many as 2 dogs, 2 cats, a couple of birds. My mother was really an animal person. And they always had some snaggletooth Persians and anyhow, but she'd have these palettes in the living room. And our living rooms were like art installations before we even knew that term. Like you could imagine in the Museum of Modern Art having my mother's living room in the museum as a sort of example of how an artist lives. Because anyway, she'd have this juicy paint on the palettes, and the cats would run through the paint, and then they would run all over our parquet floor apartments, and you'd see these little cat prints, and she would never bother to clean them up. And so it was like that level of creative chaos that was sort of embedded in my psyche, and I think I brought that into my own work as an adult. It was like a sort of pot collection of all these influences into this giant pot, and it just came out pouring right onto the canvas. So, but my initial training was very formal. I went to the New York Studio School where I studied painting. I drew for the model for 8 hours a day, for months. And I had some really scary art teachers. I had one woman named Mercedes Matter who believed in slashing paintings if she didn't like them, So she was very French, and she was like, you are so precious, your work is so pretty, we need to change that. I mean, she had this sort of quite a character. So she kind of intimidated me right out of being a painter. Like after I left the studio school, I did not paint.
For how long?
Well, I became a graphic designer because I was waiting on tables at that point. I didn't want to take money from my dad. I was proud to just sort of be self-supporting. So I started waitressing, and I thought, this is not how I want to live my life. So I went back to school and learned graphic design at School of Visual Arts. And then I got a job at Art News magazine as first a mechanical artist, and then as an associate art director. I worked my way up. And that's where my love for patterns started. So then I started going to some design studios and designing book jackets, and always leaning towards pattern. Pattern was so exciting to me, pattern and color. And then when I had my daughter, and I was married to my first husband, we lived in the Bowery, and we moved to Connecticut, and I decided to go back to painting, and it was really scary because I had these voices in my head. I'd start doing something and be like, this is not art, this is crap, like these sort of Mercedes Matter voices in my head, like, who do you think you are? You're not Cezanne. And anyway, I pushed it aside. I kept at it, did a lot of crappy paintings, and then I started doing collage, which I suddenly felt so liberating because collage was a reason to do this sort of figurative work which I craved, which before that had been like verboten. So you weren't allowed to do figurative work at that time when I was studying. It was all from life. You could do figurative work, but it had to be from life. But I had stories to tell, and I had an inner narrative that I wanted to express. So I started doing these collages, and then I left my husband because of, for many reasons, and took my 8-year-old daughter, and we moved out. And that's really when my art career blossomed. Because first I had to make a living, because I no longer had the support of my husband financially, except for child support and things like that. And so I started doing collage and showing the collages, and people wanted to buy them. I was like, oh my God, I'm selling my work. And they started really inexpensive, and then I had more shows. And I kept on painting, and at a certain point, I said to myself, I'm really interested in the figure. I'm not so interested in the background. And so I literally pulled it right out of the picture plane. That's, you know, art terminology, and I had these silhouettes. So I was doing these silhouetted figures. And then I was like, and I love pattern, and there's no crime in doing pattern, and so I sort of really turned to the pattern. And then from there, I started doing freestanding figures, and they were always painted on both sides, and I never proclaimed to be a sculptor. It was always, I'm an artist who does silhouettes, and they may be freestanding, but I'm a painter. You know, that's my first and foremost identity. But I loved the evolution from the collage to the paintings to the sculpture, you know, the sort of silhouetted sculptural pieces. And then from there, well, the public art. That's another, you know.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. But it's interesting how you share that progression. And I'm sorry you had that experience at a young age.
It was very formative, but in a way I appreciate it because it kind of pushed me into graphic design, and from there into the pattern making. And it all added up. And it's not like I abandoned those skills. They were invaluable. I tell young artists, you know, someone asked me recently in an interview, what do you tell young artists? I'm like, draw from the figure. As you know, and draw from the figure and show up. Those are my two pieces of advice. So.
And work through what you work through. It allowed you to have other experiences.
Right, exactly, yeah. So I don't regret any of it, but it was a hard time. I remember thinking I'm not a painter. I'm washed up. You know, at age 21.
Well, far you proved it far from that.
Well, thank you.
So let's get into a little bit of your painting, and you touched upon this a bit about your influences, but let's go back to when you went back to painting.
Yeah.
What were your greatest influences?
Well, again, I always have to refer to my upbringing. My mother loved Mexican art. I am half Peruvian, so I'm very proud of my heritage. In fact, I just recently changed my name. I was Danielle Mailer, which Leslie is such a I don't know, someone in my family said, call her Leslie. It's like, okay. But I changed it to Morales, which is my mother's middle name.
Nice.
I mean, my mother's last name, so I took it as a middle name. Not understanding you have to do passport and license and deeds, but anyway. So I grew up with this beautiful home with, you know, green velvet couches and fern backdrops and Mexican art everywhere and Day of the Dead motifs, and my mother collected art, and she was also an abstract expressionist, so she also had big colorful color fields of work. So when I was returning to sort of this new sort of inner self, for lack of a better word, I called upon those memories, and so that's kind of what influenced me, the color being so prominent in my work.
Yes.
So important to me. The particular colors were sort of the jewel tones, you know. I loved those rich, saturated greens and oranges. And
when you were painting, when you think about it now or when you were painting, were there any feelings that you were intentionally trying to evoke from your people?
Well, I have a very exuberant personality, and I think that, you know, maybe because of or in spite of, I had, you know, a lot of trauma as a young person. I think I always went towards the light. I always went towards that sort of vibrancy, and so it was I'm walking the tightrope between wanting people to feel good but wanting them to think. I don't want to just be whimsical. Whimsical is a word I don't like, and I have had people refer to my work as that, but I'd rather them say, you know, colorful is fine and evocative of something very powerful and positive. That those are the things that I think about.
Even before I spoke with you, I knew you were an energetic person.
Yeah, I know. I always want to be mellow. I want to like recreate I want to come in here and go, and breathe. But you know, hard as I try, I can never be that person.
Oh,
so
don't
it's
ever
just not
try.
in my.
No, but it comes through, and it's a nice quality. I mean,
thank you.
We need more people like that.
Well, I appreciate it.
You know, the world needs exuberance a bit, you know.
Well, I can't help myself. You know? I mean, if you put me a bowl of pasta in front of me, I'm the happiest person in the world. You know, I love to eat. I'm a big eater. I love to cook. Those are some of the happiest memories I have as a child, is going out for dinner. And my mother was an amazing chef. Like, she was so gourmet, and you know, we were eating artichokes at age 7, while other friends of mine were having, you know, like corned beef hash in a can or whatever.
Macaroni and cheese.
We were very, very gourmet. Leg of lamb and anyway. So.
Well, you have a sophisticated palate as well.
Apparently, yes. So.
And within the art, there's so much going on.
Yeah, that's something that I have at times tried to simplify, and I find I just don't know how to. I'm really interested in like a kinetic surface, so I do a lot of dots. Dots are very meditative for me. People say Aboriginal. I was like, no, that's not really it. That's not, although I appreciate the the work of the Aboriginal culture, that's not really what's the driving force. It's more just pattern, and I have a lot of, I mean, there's nothing in this piece right here, but,
yes, but
I have a lot of dot paintings, and every dot is intentional, and every dot is like focused, and I love the shimmering quality of those surfaces. That's kind of what I'm going after. And I also like to imbue symbols, very important to me, like icons and symbols that are personal to me, that often resonate with others, which is, you know, kind of a nice thing when that happens. But I can never just go simple. It just doesn't seem to be in my repertoire. So
everyone needs their identity.
Yes,
and
yes,
that's yours. And I would like to point out this vase cover. Can I call it a vase cover?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
That Danielle made, and it's made of what kind of paper?
So I should give you a little history about it really quickly. So I was in a gallery and I saw an 8.5 by 11 computer paper of a vase of one of the artist's work, and it was it was one side, and I thought, I can do that, because I have a very entrepreneurial side of me. I love that challenge of making something and selling it. So, you know, it kind of is counterintuitive to being a fine artist, because when you do fine, you're not thinking selling necessarily, but with this, I felt like I wanted to do something that I could make money with. So I went home and I experimented with different papers, and I came upon this sort of waterproof paper. I ordered it, and I had it printed, and then I didn't want to glue it. The sheet I glued, I sewed it, and then it comes. I'll just show you, if I might. So it just fits right over a ball jar, and it's flat and two-sided. So this was a way to showcase my art. And have it be utilitarian, and that really appealed to me. So that's kind of the story. So I've been selling them for about a year.
No, and there's a story attached to that, you said.
Yes. So this is the story. So there's a red chair in this picture. It's in my living room. My father was photographed in that red chair, I think in 1965. Diane Arbus, the famous photographer, photographed him. It's hanging in the Museum of Modern Art. He's sitting in the chair with a highball glass, looking very drunk, and sort of a portrait I don't necessarily adore, because that was my least favorite time with my father when he was drinking. But anyway, so the red chair was, when he died and my stepmother died, the red chair was in we were kind of going oldest to youngest. You know how you do when a family member dies, you take what you want. And anyway, so none of my siblings wanted this, because it was so destroyed by my brother's girlfriend's cat, who had destroyed this beautiful camelback velvet chair. That was my father. It was our heirloom. We grew up with it, like kids in diapers on that chair, you know, nursed in that chair. Like it was 9 kids through that chair. And so we're like put on the street, all of us did, because we're a very unsentimental family. My husband said, absolutely not. That's an heirloom. We're taking it home. So he picked it up, carried it 4 flights down, threw it in our pickup truck. We brought it back to Connecticut. I brought it to an upholsterer. I got beautiful velvet. I had the guy rebuild the legs that had been scratched by the cat.
Course, yes.
And it's in our living room, and it's gorgeous. And and I feel like it's like a piece of my father. So I now paint it. It's in I have many paintings with that chair. It's the Red Chair series. I wrote a story about it.
Oh, that's
It's really become a major heirloom in my life. So.
Well, you did a lot with that chair.
Yeah, so that's the story behind the chair. Thank you for reminding me.
Now, I have a couple of more questions. Tell us a little bit, public art. You do public art.
I do. So I live in Torrington. Well, I live in Goshen, Connecticut, which the nearest little small city is Torrington. And there was this huge expanse of gray wall behind Staples in Torrington. It was 200 feet. And I would go by and think, oh, God, it'd be so fun to put my figures on that wall. And for a couple of years, I thought about it. And then one day I said, I'm going to go for this. So I ended up, it took another 2 years. I figured, how hard can it be? You know, I do these cutouts. They just have to be 200 feet instead of 12 feet, you know. And so I contacted the city, the first selectman, the economic developer, just the mayor.
Right.
And I said, I really want, and they said, well, you can do whatever you like, but you have to raise the money. So we're not going to fund this.
Okay.
So I ended up, through many different channels, I ended up getting approval, which took a lot, and I got the money together, and I had about 100 kids working on this giant. And I had this idea to use a material called dye bond, which is a plastic-coated aluminum that could be cut out. You give a sign maker a drawing, and they can cut it out exactly as you specify. And so I ended up designing this very long, skinny mural that was 200 feet by 20 feet. And it was above the Naugatuck River. So I thought at the time, I need a shtick, I need a theme, I need a catching concept. So trout fish, I found out were dumped into the river to sort of regenerate the river that had been polluted and revitalize it. So I thought, okay, so trout. But I don't want to just do trout. I want to do trout that look like Matisse did them. So it became, Matisse-inspired trout on this long expanse, and that was the beginning of my public art. I hired a sign maker, a painter. It was $70,000 I raised. So at that point, though, I was very entrenched in the community. I had a lot of wealthy patrons with my work who threw money at me.
Good.
So family, friends, yeah, I raised it. So that was the beginning. And then from there, I got grants, because once you do one thing, you get state grants.
If it's good.
And it was coded in auto body shops, so it's as pristine today as it was 12 years ago. And then I have a horse in Torrington, I have a cat, and I just recently did a ballerina for the Nutmeg Conservatory, which I'm very proud of, and that's on the side of their building, and that's 22 feet. Always my same style, silhouette, not paint on the building, because I'm not a murals who goes on a building, done off-site with a team of volunteers.
Oh, volunteers.
Well, I do paint by numbers, so it's all my work, and they just paint, and they love it. They love it, and they come, mostly women my age or older. There's a couple of men sprinkled in there, and it's been like a wonderful side thing, and that's all happening while I'm still teaching.
Yes, and I want we have a few more minutes left, and I want to hear about, because a big part of your work is as a teacher.
Absolutely. Teaching is very important to me, and I love my job. It's high school boys, and it's a prep school, and I've been able to sort of somehow skirt the many responsibilities that you have to do as a prep school teacher. I don't know if you have kids in prep school, but I didn't do dorm duty or weekend duty or drive a bus. But what I did do for them is I did a lot of installation murals with the students, and that was kind of that was my sport. And I love my boys. They're so polite, and they try so hard, and all their work looks like mine, because I buy these colors that are Danielle Mailer inspired colors. But I'm leaving. I'm done. So this is my last year. I'm retiring. I mean, they say retiring, but I'm just going to move into being a full-time artist. So finally, after 30 years of teaching. Yeah, I'm a little worried about it, but I'm also need to do it at this point. So I'm ready.
So how many years were you a teacher?
30 years.
Oh.
30 years, yeah. Montessori, middle school, and now the school, Salisbury Boys School. So, yeah, which has been really, really rewarding. And I've always been one of the lucky ones who have been able to do both, be an artist and a teacher, because it's really hard to do both. But
yes. Well, you did it for 30 years.
30 years, yeah.
Oh, that's a big part of your life.
Absolutely.
And what did you, besides the teaching of art, what did you enjoy about being a teacher?
I could see boys who were struggling with their self-esteem. I was like, I'm going to build this kid up, because I remember that feeling. And I see them coming in paralyzed. They're like deer in the headlights. They're because these are athletes. I teach a school of jocks, like boys who go on to play Division I sports. So I just say, I'm going to really get them to understand that art is something that they not only can do, but they can enjoy, and it doesn't have to be gorgeous and professional and finished, but if they just make that leap to try. And so that's kind of a goal for me, And so I'm very effusive, like they'll draw a line, I'll be like, that's really a good line. No, I notice that they like plants being watered, they really thrive. They really thrive with compliments. So.
Well, that's a tough job of athletes.
But you know what? They bring the focus of sports into the art. It's fascinating. The best athletes I've had have often been the best artists, because they understand about challenge, they understand about focus. It's really exciting to see that. So I'm going to miss it.
Yeah, I was going to say they're going to miss you also.
I think so. I'd like to believe they would. I mean, they always say things like, "You're 70 or 60." Oh my God, Miss Mailer, my grandma's 70. She looks so much older than you, and I'm like, I love you, kid.
You're going to miss that also.
Right now. So.
Well, at the structure.
Structure. But at this point, I'm such a studio. I mean, I'm so used to going to the studio. I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Right.
So
You're
I'm
trained.
Really ready. Yeah, and I have more public arts percolate. I'm doing a ballet now. I'm designing some costumes for a ballet. The same ballet where I did the figure, so that's coming up. I'm going to be working on that. And so I got a bunch of, and I have this wonderful gallery in Provincetown, the Berta Walker Gallery, who represents me. And Berta is a magnificent human being, and she is really supported me and kind of helped me develop sort of more the animal themed work I do. So she loves that.
So you have a lot of things to do.
Yeah. I won't be sitting around eating bonbons.
No, I don't see that happening.
Somehow I think not.
So because my question was like, what's next for you? So this is what's next.
Okay, so the ballet is next, and then another possible public art, Jacob's Pillow. I'm kind of pursuing that, because now that I'm doing dancers, that kind of puts me into a whole new milieu. And a solo show in Cape Cod in Berta Walker Gallery in a year. So those are the big things that are next.
And you have a full life.
Yeah, and I have 3 grandkids, so I don't want to forget that.
3 grandkids, and you have a lot of siblings.
And and a lot of siblings and 3 grandkids, and I just, and a good husband, second husband.
Well, it sounds like quite a full life.
Yeah.
And today, it was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful to speak with you. Is there anything that you would want anyone to know about you that we didn't get to, about your art, your background, your...
Well, yeah, I guess I could say that you can grow up with a lot of adversity, and you can find ways to sort of celebrate and rise over and above it, and have it like run through you as part of your character and feeding your artistic process, but it doesn't have to crush you. So I guess I wanted to share that.
Well, that's like
right off the top of my head. But
well, I don't think it gets any better than that as advice, and you're an example.
Thank you.
A true example. And it was absolutely wonderful to get to meet you, get to view your art, and I encourage everyone to examine your work a little bit more if they haven't. And how do people get in touch with you?
So I have a website, daniellemailer.com, that needs to seriously be upgraded, but it still has got a lot of stuff on it. And I have an email address, which is on my website, and my cell phone. And I would be thrilled to have anyone come to my studio in Goshen, Connecticut, and come see the work firsthand, or call with questions. So I'm very excited to always meet new, interested people in my work. Customers or not, it doesn't matter.
Thank you so much for making the effort.
Absolutely,
for in person. It was a pleasure to meet you, and your work is absolutely fabulous.
Thank you, Lynn.